Ian sat restrained in a chair, his monstrous aura radiating in the dim light. The scientist, unable to hide his manic pride, declared him the lab's greatest success. 20 years ago, a gloved hand held out a piece of raw meat, the gesture deliberate and coaxing. "All right, number 17, good boy," the voice called out softly, as if speaking to something dangerous that needed careful handling. The young woman flinched back in shock as a large bird-like creature with sharp features and blazing orange eyes lunged toward her. "Whoa!" she exclaimed, instinctively stepping away from the sudden, aggressive movement. The woman crouched a short distance away, smiling in satisfaction. "See? I told you it would eat," she said, watching the creature tear into its meal. This monster was number 17, nearby. A mother turned away in disgust. "It's gross." A man gently covered his young son's eyes. "Don't look at things like that," he said firmly. 3 days ago, a blinding surge of energy erupted in the air, splitting the sky with crackling light. Number 17's golden eyes widened, reflecting the storm of power as arcs of electricity danced violently around it. Massive, grotesque number 17 let out a final haunting roar as its body began to dissolve into fragments of light. Its fading voice echoed through the air, repeating in a broken mechanical tone, "All missions complete." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, its golden rays illuminated a vast, jagged chasm that tore through the barren land. The ground was littered with bones and remnants of the fallen, a silent testament to the devastation that had unfolded here. A haunting wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the echoes of battles long past. Amid the desolate expanse, a single weathered bone lay half buried in the dust. The bone shifted suddenly, scraping against the dry earth as if stirred by an unseen force. In an instant, with a blinding pillar of light, that bone erupted from the ground, tearing through the darkness and piercing the sky. A massive spinal column, brimming with crackling energy, shot up from the earth, each segment pulsing with unnatural vitality. The narration echoed ominously. This was no ordinary relic. It carried within it the combined power of 527 different types of monster cells, a grotesque fusion of countless creatures' strengths. Its skeletal frame continued to assemble, ribs locking into place around a dark, pulsating core. This abomination was no mere monster, but Chimera Hunter number 17, a weapon forged from the cells of hundreds of deadly beasts, reborn for one purpose alone. From its spine and ribs, sinewy cords of muscle began weaving into place, twisting and binding together with unnatural speed. The once lifeless bones pulsed with grotesque vitality, each fiber brimming with monstrous power as the creature's body took shape. A blinding explosion erupted, flooding the darkness with searing light. Then bare feet touched down softly on the cracked ground, the air around them still hazy with lingering smoke from the explosion. He looked down at his hands in disbelief, his voice trembling. What is this? The unfamiliar warmth of flesh replacing what he had once been. A haze of confusion filled his mind as he took in his transformed body. Human again now? He asked himself, the words barely more than a whisper. Bathed in the warm glow of the rising sun, he stood at the center of the barren land, his shadow stretching long across the cracked earth. The massive stone arch framed the light behind him, as if the world itself was announcing his return. Revival. The man stood there, looking down at himself in disbelief. His voice trembled as he wondered if he had truly returned to being human again. He looked at his hand, noticing the monstrous claws that had formed. Although he appeared human, he realized that the monster cells within him still remained, meaning he couldn't truly call himself human. Reflecting on the situation, he thought that a lot of time must have passed, and since the lab hadn't come to retrieve him, something unusual was going on. He realized he had been discarded. The experimental number once engraved on his wrist had vanished as well. Looking at his hand, he wondered if this meant he was finally free, no longer bound to the lab or its control. Thinking about the nature of this power, he concluded that such a transformation could only belong to an immortal type ability. He understood the nature of the ability. It allowed the body to revive up to 3 times, as long as its core remained intact and wasn't destroyed. He recalled how it was believed that human and immortal cells could never fuse. Yet, looking at himself now, he realized that his body had fully recovered, restored to its peak condition. He realized that with all the side effects of the experiment gone, his condition had reached its best state. The constant haze that clouded his mind since the beginning had finally lifted. Even the spells engraved on him to prevent escape or rebellion had completely disappeared. He thought to himself that if his existence as experiment number 17 had truly ended, then perhaps it was finally time for him to live a normal life, as a human. He reflected that number 17, was nothing more than a label forced on him by the lab. His true identity had been buried beneath that number. He remembered someone once telling him that while he might seem rough or even unstable, he should strive to live with purpose, by consciously helping others. He recalled the words spoken to him. If he could live a life helping countless others, that would give him true purpose. And in that moment, his original name came back to him, Cheon Do-woon. He scoffed at the idea, calling it nonsense. To him, the thought of helping others felt meaningless. After all, how could an orphan who grew up in the slums possibly be capable of saving anyone else? It didn't make sense. He stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the vast horizon as the sun set. With his thoughts heavy, he questioned what path he should take now. The idea of revenge echoed in his mind, tempting him as a possible answer. He realized that revenge wasn't something he could pursue blindly. It required a clear target standing before him, someone to focus that rage upon. He admitted to himself that the events which had once fueled his hatred now felt so distant that his desire for revenge no longer burned as fiercely. Besides, there was no way for him to return to the human world at this moment. He decided that if he lived long enough, he would eventually cross paths with them again. For now, he pushed the thought aside, telling himself he would deal with it when the time came. He narrowed his eyes, his gaze firm and focused as he looked down on his lower body. He stood tall, his back to the setting sun as its light shone through him, casting a powerful silhouette. In silence, he faced the horizon, lost in thought about the uncertain path ahead. At last, he made his choice. For the time being, he decided to set everything else aside and try living, at least a little, like a human. As he took his first steps forward, a simple but important thought crossed his mind. If he was going to live like a human, the first thing he needed was clothes. As he walked across the barren land, he wondered to himself, when was the last time he had even worn clothes? The thought felt distant, almost foreign, after everything he had been through. As he wandered near the shimmering lake, he wondered what material he could possibly use to make clothes. The thought lingered in his mind. Whatever it was, it would need to be tough enough to last. Peeking through the bushes, he considered his next step. Perhaps it was best to look around the area for something useful, anything that could serve as material for clothes. As he searched, something caught his attention. With a curious look, he leaned closer and muttered, This is... He came across the fallen body of a large beast. Observing its state, he wondered if it had died in a territorial dispute. Judging by the lack of major injuries, he concluded that it must have been an exceptionally strong creature. Looking closer at the creature, he realized the truth. It hadn't fallen in battle. Instead, it must have died from poison. He smirked with satisfaction and raised his hand. Good, he muttered, relieved. It was perfect timing. Just when he needed leather. Without hesitation, he drew his blade. As a sparks of energy flashed, his hand turned into a blade. This was another creature's power he got. Holding the curved blade firmly, he muttered with a faint smile. I guess I'll need a blade to make it easier, right? He recalled the lessons he had learned back at the lab. First, cut the belly straight, then make incisions along the limbs, right? He muttered to himself, visualizing the steps in his mind. With a determined look, he nodded to himself and said, Okay, let's try it. As he pressed the blade down, blood unexpectedly seeped out, making his eyes widen in shock, and the next second, his body was suddenly enveloped in a surge of dark gas that comes out of that bird's body. Eyes narrowing, he muttered in disbelief. This is... The air around him twisted violently as a sinister miasma spread out. His eyes widened in realization. Poisonous aura. The ground darkened, trees withered, and even the fallen beast nearby convulsed under the suffocating energy. Despite the poisonous aura swirling violently around him, his body remained completely unharmed, no damage. Glancing at the faint stench in the air, he muttered calmly, It smells. I'll have to wash it. After finishing his task, he looked at his handiwork with satisfaction. It's done. Not bad for a first try, is it? He remarked proudly. Then, without hesitation, he turned his gaze forward and muttered, Next. He stepped into the clear stream, the cool water rippling around his hand as bubbles rose to the surface with each movement. After cleaning it, he examined the hide in his hand. Puzzled, it looked soft when I saw it, he muttered, tugging at the material. But as he tested its texture, he frowned. Is it because it's monster hide? It's too stiff. It's not like it's a metal plate or something. His eyes widened as an idea suddenly struck him, a spark of realization lighting up his expression. Oh, in times like this, he exclaimed, clearly having thought of a solution. Without hesitation, he slammed his fists down on the monster hide repeatedly, using brute force to soften and shape it. The ground shook with each powerful strike. Panting slightly, he glanced at his work and muttered, Is this how you tanned? He wasn't entirely sure of the process, but reasoning aloud, he added, "Well, it must be, right?" He lifted the processed hide in his hands, giving it a gentle shake. A bright smile spread across his face as he thought, "Oh, it's done. It's soft." The once stiff monster hide had transformed into a smooth, pliable material, just as he had hoped. He nodded in satisfaction, holding the tanned hide. "Good," he murmured. "The size should be roughly this, right?" Everything seemed to be coming together just as he had envisioned. Just then, the bird beast which he just skinned, a small fire awaked on it, showing that it's alive. After cutting the hide roughly to size,